Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. We're talking Avengers Endgame, the spoiler review. Hey, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent. Today we're going to be talking Avengers Endgame, my movie review, and we're going to do it with spoilers because Marvel has orchestrated such a fervor around this movie about finding out anything that happens in this movie before you see the film that to even talk about what the general plot is considered a spoiler. Whereas like Infinity War, they said, oh yeah, the plot is Thanos, the purple guy, is coming to get all 6 Infinity Stones and hell is going to break loose. That was the plot of Infinity War. You could talk about that. You could talk about Infinity War in a non-spoiler context and give enough information about the film about why it was good and why it was bad to accurately illustrate the movie, right? Or why you did or didn't like it. Endgame, the marketing has been so small, so constrained, and more of focusing on the past or the celebration of the 10 years or 11 years, whatever we're on now, that the talking about the plot is tantamount to a spoiler, a massive spoiler, if I even tells you anything that happens in this movie. You know, Thanos demands your silence was one thing. That was really about how Infinity War ended with the snap. Thanos demands your silence this time around, or the hashtag don't spoil the endgame that you see everybody talking about on Facebook, is not about the ending of the movie. It's about the entire movie. So for me to try and talk about this without any spoilers would be a very quick video, and I want to go into more detail about this movie than just that. A 2-minute video or whatever like that. So the short version is, I enjoyed the movie. I really, really liked it. I'm not a 10 out of 10 person for this movie. I'm not in love with it. It's not the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I've only seen it once. So I don't know. Will it grow when I see it again? Maybe. Maybe not. I tried watching Aquaman the second time, and I was less in love with that movie than I was the first time. I don't know. So anyway, let's dive into it. So spoilers on from here on out, and if you don't want to watch anymore, come back when you've watched the movie, and we'll go from there. So I'll give you a moment to pause and leave. Okay, either they left or you came back. So welcome back. Thanks for staying. That kind of thing. So Avengers Endgame. We're undoing the snap is the plot of this movie. How to undo the snap. And that is perceived or done with time travel. They call it a time heist in this film. And while it was very smart, it was very difficult to follow. There were a lot of things about the time travel rules that I didn't feel like were really explained. They spent so much time talking about the Back to the Future rules in every other time travel movie to set up that all that is bullshit in this universe, and it doesn't work like that. But then they didn't spend the same amount of time explaining how those rules work. We did get this nice illustration with the Ancient One with the timeline and the branch, and snipping that branch by taking the Infinity Stone and putting it back in the exact same time, that kind of stuff, which was a vital thing to the movie, and then ended up we never saw that part of the movie. That would have been a cool thing. Or hell, it would have even been a better final battle or something if you had people chasing Cap to do this last thing in the movie. I don't know, different ways things can go. That's fine. But all in all, I think this movie is a worthy movie, a worthy follow-up to Infinity War. It had the epicness, it had the scope, it had the moments. There was many, many moments where I was leaning forward to the edge of my seat. There were 2 moments. Let's switch back to the good things about this movie. 2 moments where I screamed out loud in the theater. And we saw this Thursday night, 9 o'clock. It was a packed theater, and the first time was in the first 15 minutes. And I think you can guess what that was. So when Thor fucking chops Thanos' head off, I went, what the fuck? Like, loud as hell. Like, this... that first 15 minutes was like, whoa, this was quick. We got everybody back. They had the argument. They were like, or 20 minutes, whatever, how long it was. Captain Marvel's like, let's go get this bastard. And they're like, let's go get this bastard. And they all hop in the Murano, or whatever that ship's called now, from the Guardians, and they leave. And they find Thanos, and they fucking kill him when he says the thing's destroyed. you know, and I was like, whoa, man, that was quick. And I was like, what are we going to do now? And then the time heist thing started developing, and then it's 5 years later. Here's Scott Lang. He's been in the quantum world and figured out that time moves differently. So there's that. So the second time was a lot more exciting. It was less of a like, what are we going to do for the next 2.5 hours at this point? It was during the final battle. Well, was it 3? Anyway, before, you know, the on your left moment. It was when Captain America picks up Mjolnir who had come from the past and starts swinging it around, and I literally leaned forward in my seat and shouted, "Worthy!" Oh! And it was amazing moment. It really got me going. And as soon as I finished yelling "Worthy," they cut to Thor, and Thor goes, "I knew it." Ha! And it just, you know, went from there. The on your left moment where like the portal opens up and everybody's coming through for Cap and everybody else was a great moment indeed. I really wish Marvel, or I mean, they didn't really talk about this last year or not, but still it feels like last year the hype was rewatch all the Marvel movies before Infinity War comes out, because that's what it's going to matter. And that wasn't true at all when you saw this film. We should have done the March to Infinity War or the March to Endgame this year, hyping up for Endgame, because that would have given us a refresher on all the different scenes they visited back to. I was sitting next to my wife, and she had watched all those movies last year with me, but I still was finding myself explaining to her, okay, this is from Thor: The Dark World, this is the planet from Guardians 2, or Guardians 1, and then when Peter Quill showed up, I'm like, okay, now do you know where we are? You know, Vormir, which was in the middle of Infinity War when Gamora got killed, that was very confusing for her, like, what is this place, why are we here, that kind of thing. You know, and what was the other ones? The past stuff with Tony and Steve and the Avengers 1 movie, you know, that I was like, man, I really wish I'd watched everything this year rather than last year in 2018. But you live and you learn. The next time that I do a Avengers or Marvel movie marathon, too many M's, I think it will pay off very good when I finally watch Endgame, when I have it on, you know, 4K Blu-ray or whatever, and can appreciate everything that went into here. What I thought was really cool about these time travel scenes, we got Rene Russo back as Frigga, Thor's mother, and kind of redeemed her. I don't remember her in the first Thor movie very much, if she was there at all, but I do remember her from the second movie, and I did like her scenes in that second film, even up until her death. So she wasn't in it that long, but it felt impactful. And then for them to revisit Thor: The Dark World, arguably, well, in my opinion, no longer the worst Marvel movie. Captain Marvel kind of down there too, for me. And but general consensus is that Thor: The Dark World is one of the lower tier Marvel movies, just like Iron Man 2. But anyway, it kind of redeemed that movie a little bit. It gave you something to chew on. Here's Frigga, who everybody had kind of forgot about. And it turns out Rene Russo and, you know, Chris Hemsworth, their chemistry was great as mother and son. It was like one of the strongest parts of that movie, and they really brought it forward and did things with it here that were really interesting. I love seeing the Ancient One on top of the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York City during the battle in Avengers 1. Tilda Swinton coming in and talking and all that stuff was really cool, and it seemed like she had a knowledge of who Stephen Strange was in the entire timeline almost. Like, he's going to be the next Sorcerer Supreme. She knows he's over there performing surgery right now, and she knows that she's going to choose him to replace her. So that was interesting, and that was really cool. I like that moment. I like the heist, seeing the events after Avengers 1, where, you know, Avengers 1 kind of ends with them at the end of the big battle, that shot that you saw from an angle or behind, where they're all looking at Loki and being like, you know, you're done, dude. And just the immediate aftermath, and Iron Man's like, all right, enough posing. You know, everybody goes back to doing their thing, or people leave, that kind of thing. That was a really cool scene to watch. Just the stuff that isn't normally necessary in regular movies because it doesn't move the story forward. Whereas here they were setting the story in that exact spot. and it was just cool to see everybody kind of like breathe of a sigh of relief. So that was interesting. So there are a lot of great moments in this movie. Those are just a few of them. So there's some interesting things this movie did not go into enough, I think. They had this 5 years later flash forward where the world's still falling apart and half the population is gone, everybody's struggling, and it never really explained why in 5 years nothing had been cleaned up. I know that half the population, has died, the leaders are no longer there, the people with essential knowledge are no longer there, but it seemed like there were just dead cars, boats, airplanes, trash, strewn about everywhere. It looked like a scene out of Walking Dead, as opposed to a world where half the people had left. I would have thought maybe they would have had a cleanup effort and moved some of these cars out somewhere else, or gotten rid of them, or cleaned up all the debris around the city field where the Mets play. Is there no baseball teams anymore? There are no more sports teams? Would have given everybody in the minors that did survive anyway a chance to move up, continue life going on. Really felt like the world just kind of hit pause after that moment and then never moved forward, even though Cap was leading a group telling people how to move forward with their lives, even though he can't do it himself, which was kind of odd. And then the whole thing when they brought everyone back and you just have that thing with Peter Parker seeing Ned Leeds in high school, and they're both like, "Oh, you're alive, I'm alive too." Like they hadn't called each other at the first moment that battle had ended. Anyway, it was just like, wait, if they're going back to high school, then they both were dusted, and half their classmates at least should have graduated by then if they kept going on with school in these 5 years. Half their classmates would have graduated if they had kept going on with school over these 5 years that, we jumped forward. If they were sophomores, you'd think at least you would have been able to finish your high school diploma within the next 5 years after that, even though there's less kids, less teachers, whatever. Now I realize that, it's not exactly half of everything. Half the leaders, half the teachers, half the janitors, half the, garbage men, whatever, was just 50%. So maybe it was more of this group, less of that group, more of this group, or the statistics ended up being that we lost 70% of the engineering force in the United States just randomly, and we lost 30% of teachers somewhere else. I guess that stuff's not explained. It's a really nitnoidy thing to look at, but it was just weird. And then thinking about what that means for Spider-Man Far From Home, which I don't know if it's a prequel to this film, to Avengers Infinity War, or if it is in fact a sequel to Endgame. And apparently this Far From Home movie that comes out in July is the thing that's going to wrap up Phase 3, and that'll be the bookend. Similar to how you have an Ant-Man movie ending Phase 2, I believe, and I think Avengers was the end of Phase 1, but Ant-Man 1 after Age of Ultron ended Phase 2, and then we moved into Phase 3. So just interesting things to think about that I felt could have been explored a little bit more instead of what? I don't really know. This movie was really long, 3 hours. I did not leave, didn't have to go to the bathroom, I didn't get a drink for that reason, so I sat through it and saw every moment. Now, we've got to talk about what happened to our characters at the end, right? Tony died. I think we all saw that coming. I think I was expecting Cap to die as well, if not, one, if not both of them. And did Cap die? Yeah, he came back as an old man, which I did like. They gave him an ending. His life had been fulfilled at that point. He didn't feel unfulfilled. Tony fulfilled his goal, his vision of putting a shield around the world, and that was himself at the end of the day, right? With the snap. I am Iron Man. Boom. Which is funny how all this is on purpose, of course, right? He ended the first film saying, "I am Iron Man," behind the podium. And then he ended his life and his career in these films saying that same line with the snap at the end. Black Widow dying, which I thought was weird because we know she's got another movie. She's got a movie of her own coming out. So is Scarlett Johansson in that at all? Then it must be a prequel, right? or she's a clone. Maybe they're going to introduce cloning in the Marvel Universe now. So just kind of all the weird pieces of what's coming down the pike as a moviegoer, I guess didn't jive with me watching the film. Now, I was sitting next to a gentleman who I was talking to before the preview started, and Tony Stark died, and this guy bawled the entire time as he realized that Tony Stark was going to die. And then he continued to bawl in all the little vignettes after Tony Stark had died and the film had kind of ended. During the funeral, the Cap stuff, I think by the very end he was kind of done. But, man, he got really emotional. And I heard other people behind me and in front of me as well that were sniffling and crying and stuff. Me, however, I didn't get that feeling for some reason. Me watching The Dark Knight Rises, I got that feeling as a big crescendo to the film. That series, which I really, really enjoyed all three of those movies. Whereas I have enjoyed all of the Avengers movies, but I don't know if it's more of like I'm a Batman guy versus a Marvel guy. I have no idea. But I didn't get emotional during this film when Black Widow died, when Tony died. Cap, I thought was sweet, and then giving the shield to Sam. Like, I like all these moments. I did not cry, but I think maybe I'm a little disappointed because I went in seeing some of the social media reviews saying like, oh, it's up and down and up and down. It's a roller coaster and you're going to cry, blah, blah, blah. And I went in thinking that was going to happen, and I didn't. Whereas when I went in Dark Knight Rises, I went in excited, not knowing what was going to happen. And then when everything did happen, it was like, ugh. So maybe that's a condition of me, being tuned into what's going on and stuff like that. Maybe it's not. I tried to stay away from everything as much as possible, but I did want to know that the film was good. So, I don't know. I did really enjoy this film. We were going to go see it again. We did not see it in IMAX. We're going to go see it in IMAX the following time, whenever that ends up being. Hopefully it's still in theaters. I was looking up, if you're interested in this, what's coming up next in IMAX so that you know when that you probably need to go rush out. Maybe check with your local IMAX theater. I think John Wick is on the IMAX website as being in IMAX. And I'm like, John Wick 3, why does that need to be in IMAX? Avengers, come on. And then following that is Godzilla, King of the Monsters, which is May 21st. So your theater may be bumping Avengers for John Wick 3, or they may be keeping it, which I think is a smart thing to do after it made all this money this weekend, or is going to make so much money this weekend, and then bumping it. They probably will for sure be bumped for Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested. Now, we got to talk about this IMAX stuff because it's been bugging me. The film shot in IMAX. They're using a special Alexa camera to film it, not the big 70mm film cameras. It's like a 8K digital camera. This is like weird film shit for people that don't care about this, but they film it all in basically what ends up being a 16:9 ratio, the size of your TV. And they did the same thing on Aquaman. And Aquaman came out on Blu-ray, and the entire movie wasn't in that ratio, but a large portion of it was. And those portions of that film in Aquaman did show up on my television as 16:9. And then the portions that weren't in IMAX, quote unquote, went back down to the normal widescreen with the black bars on my big HD TV. Another film that did this really well was the second Hunger Games movie. Was it Catching Fire? Where she comes up in the elevator. If you haven't seen this part, it's really inventive. The film, the first 30 minutes or whatever till they get to the arena of that film is in widescreen. I think I'm out of frame here. In widescreen, and then as Katniss goes up the elevator, the film widens very slowly as she ascends the elevator after the fashion designer dies. And then it ends up being widescreen, and that is preserved on every version of the film I've seen, like even on the digital version on my phone or iPad, something like that, the Blu-ray, that's there. Avengers, for some reason, Infinity War, the entire thing shot in IMAX, and you're seeing this taller presentation of the film. They've rendered all of the effects, they've poured all the money into this format, and yet it's being shown in only certain theaters, and that's a business decision. I know that. It's promotion, whatever. But Aquaman and Catching Fire and Dark Knight Rises and Dark Knight, on the actual Blu-ray discs have that format change, whereas Infinity War is just regular widescreen on the Blu-ray. Dude, it's an HD TV. Give me some more image. Come on, man. And it's going to be the same thing with Endgame, unfortunately. This thing's going to come out on Blu-ray in 3 to 4 months, and it's going to be regular widescreen, which, watching it last night, I didn't feel like I missed anything, but knowing what I know, I was like, ugh, this is going to look great in IMAX. And unfortunately, it might be the only time you see it in that taller format because they didn't release Infinity War in that format. On 4K, no less. Like, come on, guys. This should be an easy thing to do. So that's kind of a bummer. But anyway, Avengers Endgame is a whole lot of fun. If you need to go see it again, go see it again. If you just spoiled yourself, it's your own freaking fault. I gave you time to leave. But I really did like this film. I really did enjoy it. Did I come out of it like super hyped up? I'm like, wow, that was really good. As Shazam, I was like, no, that was really good. But I don't know. I think I expected more of me and my emotions, that when I didn't react the way that the gentleman next to me did and crying and all that thing, I felt like maybe somewhere inside me I'm feeling like this movie wasn't as good as everyone's saying it is. Maybe it's overhyped or something, or I don't know. It's still a really good film. It is still really watchable, even though the time travel doesn't make any sense at all, because they didn't explain it very good. But and you really do have to watch like Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is probably the least watched Marvel movie to this point, is those two Ant-Man movies. You really need to watch Ant-Man and the Wasp to understand this movie at all. And that is good for Ant-Man and the Wasp because people will go back and watch that movie now. It's going to get a bump in the streaming numbers and the DVD sales and rentals and all that stuff. But people are going to go into this movie that skipped that one last year and go, wait, what's going on? Who's this guy? What? You know, and that's unfortunate because it's going to lessen their enjoyment of the movie. So there you have it. There's probably like 20-25 minutes on Avengers Endgame. Random thoughts. I really liked it. I'm super pleased. You know, but I'm not. I feel like Infinity War, to wrap things up, was better because it ended on that cliffhanger and the belief, the almost disbelief of, man, they really did the snap. Whereas like the end of this film, you knew there's other stuff coming. You have TV shows that are coming. All the stuff we know that's coming down the pike kind of lessens the impact of, oh, they actually did bring everybody back. Like, there was only one way this movie could end. And it did end that way in a certain way, you know, with everybody being brought back, and we're getting a Captain America, Black Panther 2, we're getting a Doctor Strange 2, and those characters were undusted. You know, Spider-Man's got a movie come out in 3 months, he's undusted, that kind of thing. So, did it lessen the impact? Of course it did. So, take that with what you will. I'm giving this movie an 8 out of 10. So that would be like a 4 out of 5 stars, which I think is my normal review scale. So 4 out of 5, Avengers Endgame. Go see it. Enjoy it. Thanks for watching, as always. Like, comment, subscribe down below. Let me know what you guys thought of Avengers Endgame. And as always, I will see you guys in the funny pages.